And there was one guy in the room who was a little bit younger. He's like in his 40s. And he was like, he was super, he had like more energy about him. And he was talking about Airbnb. And he's like, guys, like, I'm renting out some of my long terms. I flipped into short term because they're making a lot of money.
So the big question is this: how do real estate investors who don't have a ton of free time, don't have access to off-market deals, and didn't start life on third base, how do we conservatively grow our real estate business to support our families, finally leave the corporate rat race, and build a legacy? That is the question. This podcast will give you the answers. I'm Ed Mathews, and this is Real Estate Underground. Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. It is Ed Mathews with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm grateful that you are making us a part of your day. You know, one of the things that I keep harping on, and I'm grateful for you to indulge me, is keep those comments coming, because I want to hear about, obviously we started off at a multifamily show, and that's what I do for a living, but also flip houses. And you know, every once in a while, folks want to hear about other unique asset classes where there's opportunity, especially given that multifamily, there's not a whole lot going on these days, especially here in the Northeast. So with that, I have invited Kenny Bedwell from STR Insights. Really happy to have him come to the show and join us today. So Kenny, welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Ed. I'm excited to be here and share some nuggets.
Yeah, let's go. So for those folks who haven't discovered you yet, why don't we start with talking about you and your background?
Absolutely. So my background is actually not that exciting. I'm just an old data analyst. I worked for Citibank for a few years as a data analyst in the equities market. When people ask me what I did during that time, I was, I work for Citibank and I did this, and they just start to fall asleep. And so team got engaged. I'm like, I just deal with data, and they're like, okay, cool. And they leave me alone, because that's as far as they're like, okay, that's it. So I started investing in real estate though in 2017 while I was at Citi, and I house hacked. So this was pretty common. A lot of people get started that way. I lived in one side of a duplex and wanted to rent out the other, but I rented out the other side as an Airbnb. And at that time, you could throw up any property anywhere and make money on Airbnb. And that's what we did. We were doing 3 times the rent in that particular property than what we could get as a long-term rental. And so we decided to double down, and we kept buying properties in and around the area we lived in, which is in Buffalo, New York. And so as I was growing my portfolio down there, I realized that other cities across the country were starting to ban or limit or regulate short-term rentals. Regulation's been a big piece recently in restricting what you can and can't do with short-term rental properties. And it felt, as a guy as a data analyst, Citibank, in the equities market, this gut feeling of diversification. I had all my eggs in one basket, and I had to invest somewhere else. And so that's where I used my data skills, and I pulled in a bunch of data and some spreadsheets and picked some markets to invest in, and really started to expand my portfolio outside of where I was comfortable with. And so today I have short-term rentals in New York, North Carolina, Kentucky, Texas, Arizona, and I have a boutique hotel in New Orleans.
Cool. Okay. I was just down in New Orleans. So yeah, it's funny when you talk about corporate life. I remember, so I'm a former technology guy, and I remember overhearing my daughter talking to one of her buddies about what their dads did. And Maggie, my little one, who's not little anymore, was saying, I don't know, he does something with computers, but no one really understands what he does. Like,
yeah, seriously, you're like,
right?
It's not that interesting. Yeah,
it's really not. So how did you pick short-term rentals as opposed to, I mean, there's even sub niches within that space, right? You know, medical professionals and obviously vacation rentals and so on. And so how did you kind of land on STR as an asset?
So yeah, that's a good question. So it started with, I'm like very risk adverse. When we did the house hack, it was always this idea that it was going to be a long-term rental and make sense from those numbers standpoint. And at the time it could. 2017, prices hadn't exploded. They were hot. They were getting up there. I remember it was, this is pretty expensive. And, but then COVID happened and we see the numbers today. And so it's hindsight, but at the time, yeah. So we're like, okay, this has got to make sense as a long-term rental. And I met this guy. I was actually at one of these REI meetings in Buffalo, and man, they were just full of all these old geezers who had 50 apartment complex unit or 100 unit. Everyone's speaking in terms of doors or units in the multifamily space. And they just sit around and talk about apartments and stuff like that. And I was just, this is what real estate investors do. This is how they invest. I'm going to do long-term rentals. I'm going to be like old Joey over here and have 100 doors at some point. And there was one guy in the room who was a little bit younger. He's like in his 40s. And he was like, he was super, he had like more energy about him. And he was talking about Airbnb. And he's like, guys, like, I'm renting out some of my long terms. I flipped into short term because they're making a lot of money. And everyone's, that's just a trend. That's a fad. That'll go away. That's random guess. That's scary, whatever. Like, but I was like, maybe he's on to something. I'd stayed at Airbnbs at that time. I was in my 20s at the time, and I was staying in hostels and room shares and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, you know what? I can try that. And if it doesn't work out, worst case, we just turn it back into a long-term rental that's furnished and maybe even make more money from as a long-term rental. And so that's how we got that confidence, is somebody else talking it up, showing us the model, showing us essentially the data. Look, I'm making X, everybody else is making Y. It's a no-brainer. And then you're like, I have a property, let's give it a shot. So that's what we did.
Yeah. So I've been in similar rooms. Mine was in Connecticut, not Buffalo, but very similar rooms at our RIA here. It's interesting, right? So one of the things that got me, there was kind of two events that got me interested in short-term rentals, although I don't own any right now. One was a lady by the name of Robin Thompson, who travels the RIAs and talks about, she's got a training program and she's done very well. I think she markets herself as the queen of rehabs, but she's since moved to short-term rentals. And, the metric that she spoke about was something that you mentioned as well. And that is 2.5 to 3x what a typical monthly long-term rental would bring in, from a, whether it's VRBO or Airbnb or you're doing it on your own, the short-term play. So can you help me and the audience understand where that can you talk us through why, if I have 1,000 square foot 2-bedroom apartment and I can rent it for, pick a number, $1,000 a month in one city, 2 doors down, you have the exact same building and you can rent your unit out for $2,500 to $3,000 a month on average, annualized, right? How does that work?
People naturally, they want shorter, it's kind of the discount thing, right? If we buy something in bulk, we expect a discount. We buy something that's supposed to last a longer period of time, hence consistency. We want some sort of discount, or we pay less for that. And people on the flip side, like contractors or servicers or whatever, they're willing to give a discount because it provides consistency of revenue. That's one of the benefits of long-term rental or passive income, is it's consistent for the most part, and there's not a lot of variance in it. What you get's what you get. And that is highly valued, especially when time is very precious to a lot of people. And that's why multifamilies are very popular for the most part, is because it's theoretically passive income and it's can theoretically consistent. I know there's stories out there. So that's why I said, for the most part, it's consistent, right?
It's well managed, right? I mean, there's a management component to it that you actually have to follow through.
Right. If you're dealing with squatters, all this other stuff, that's a whole nother animal.
Yeah,
but they weren't
lucrative.
squatters at one point. They were consistent paying tenants. I have long-term rentals myself. It's really nice when I get the check each month and I'm like, awesome. I just didn't have to do anything. And there's $3,000. But at the end of the day, the short-term rental side, the risk obviously is inconsistency. It's shorter stays. But if you have the amenities, you have what people are desiring, they're willing to pay for that, right? Absolutely. And if you're, for example, a lot of the properties I buy, they're 5 bedrooms or more, because I believe I'm not competing with hotels. Hotels don't have 5-bedroom properties with kitchens. I have full kitchens, full everything. I'm targeting families, groups, reunions, getaway, corporate retreats, things like that. Weddings even at some of our properties. And my competition is not hotels. So I'm competing against quality and resort-like style amenities. And that's exactly what we add to our property, but people are willing to pay for that. People are willing to pay for quality and not for quantity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Just speaking to my own experience, when our kids were, little to medium size, small to medium sized, we stayed in short-term rentals all the time, mainly because, we have dogs, and occasionally if the property was dog friendly, we'd bring the puppies with us. But at the very least, it's so much easier to feed a hungry toddler in a kitchen than in a commissary downstairs, right? So
Exactly. And they'll have, but probably should have booster seats and high chairs and all kinds of things that a hotel just might have like a standard version of. But if somebody else is using it, you can't use, there's just a lot of big benefits, in my opinion, for families and short-term rentals, which I don't think a lot of people argue against that.
so when you're looking at properties, you mentioned you have long term as well. You mentioned 5 bedrooms or 5 bedrooms or more. What are some of the other things that you look for, when you're trying to decide, okay, is this a property? Is this a target? And then is it a long-term or a short-term property? What are some of the things you're looking for?
Yeah. So I don't, the number one misconception I see today for a lot of real estate investors who want to play it quote unquote safe in the short term rentals. So it's they're trying to get involved in the space is they say, I want to find a property that if it doesn't work out as a short term rental, I can just long term rent it. Okay. Those properties don't exist anymore. You could do that when I got started, but because of the level of competition there is in short term rentals today, especially vacation rentals, you have to go all in. You have to invest into the property. You have to make it, meaning you add professional design, you add really cool amenities, and you make the property special towards a guest experience. This isn't a residential home anymore. This is almost like a resort style. This isn't even true for 2 bedrooms or 3 bedrooms you put up on Airbnb. It's gotten really competitive.
So
Yep.
all right. No, go ahead. Finish your thought.
Yeah, no. So I was just going to say, like, to begin with, like when I'm looking, I am specifically looking in markets that I know I'm going to be having a vacation rental, not a long-term rental. Like the lens or I don't know, the cap of, I'm putting on the cap of I'm looking for long-term rentals is completely different than the cap of I'm looking for short-term rentals when I'm hunting for deals.
Gotcha. So when you talk about amenities, and I get the idea of, obviously you're furnishing them, but it's more than that, right? You're almost creating a character, right? In terms of the property itself. We were talking about a media company before we hit record that is quite litigious, so I won't even mention the name, but
Yeah.
But it's interesting, I think that's what you're talking about when you're talking about amenities. Can you say a little more about that?
Yeah. So amenities, it starts with a guest avatar. So when I'm looking at a short-term rental property and trying to decide what to add to that property to make it special and stand out and be lucrative, it really comes down to your furnishing and the amenities that you add to the property, but targeting around the who, not the what. Let's look at an example. I have a property on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail I bought for $1 million. Okay. We put about $400,000 into it. That's not including the down payment. So and all that 400,000, you're like, what was this property? It's a 9-bedroom, 7-bath. It was 9,700 square feet. Okay. All that money went into improvements into the property. It's a big property. It's on 5 acres, has 2 ponds, but it was all focused on the guest experience. Who is coming there? So when we looked at the property, we didn't just go, oh, this is a really big property and we want to buy it. It's $1 million and we want to put all this money into it. We said, why are people going to this market to begin with? It's the Bourbon Trail of Kentucky, obviously bourbon drinkers. So we know we're not targeting families, right? We're not finding a property where we can add a ton of family amenities. We're finding a property where we can add the guest avatar, which are older groups. Let's think of the Napa Valley, but for bourbon. And people want bathrooms, their own bathrooms. They don't want they don't want bunk beds. They want king beds or queen beds. They don't want, when we think about the hot tub, this place sleeps 28 people. If you only put one hot tub in, that's 8-person hot tub, that's only 8 people. These are adults. They want to hang out together. So we have 2 hot tubs. We have a heated pool. We have a yoga studio, a gym, a movie theater, a golf simulator. There's many putt. It's like a little micro resort. The theming, the mood or the design of the property, it's moodier. It's like bourbon themed. Think like brown leather and cigars and things like that. It's not that a family can't stay there. We actually have quite a few families that stay at this property and enjoy it, but all the amenities and everything is targeted towards our ideal guest avatar, which is Bourbon Trail groups. And our property, so that property grossed last year $375,000. It netted, so this is after my mortgage, all my expenses and everything. This is profit. It profited $175,000. That's net.
For you. Good for you.
It's a big property. We invested a lot of cash, big investment, but big reward. And it all started with the who, not the what.
Yeah. Yeah. And 8 years from now, you're completely out of debt if you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. All right. So in terms of, now you mentioned several different states that you own properties. And I understand, New York, because that's where you're from. I understand Carolina, because that's where you live. But you also mentioned Arizona and a couple other states, Kentucky, obviously. How do you decide where to hunt for these types of properties?
Yeah, it's funny. So when I was living in New York, I bought New York, but before I even lived in North Carolina, I bought North Carolina. So so I'm looking, for me personally, I'm looking for properties that, number one, fit my budget. I typically target around the 800 to 1.3 range for the types of properties I'm looking for. I'm looking for larger properties that I can target large groups because they're willing to pay the most money in my experience, that sleep more than 20 people. And then I'm looking for regulation friendly markets as well. That's very important. So typically vacation markets where there is some sort of regulation, but it's not anti short-term rentals. It's friendly. They just want to make sure you're not throwing wild parties or not having safe properties.
Right.
And then most importantly, in markets where I'm seeing high revenue potential, meaning I'm already seeing properties in that market based on the data who are performing the revenue numbers I want to see. So if I can get, hey, budget right, regulation, I've got a recipe for a potentially successful area to hunt into.
Yeah. One of the things, and my friend Stephanie does vacation rentals. She lives here in the Connecticut area with her family, but she invests in Joshua Tree. I think that's like Northern California or Central California. I'm always interested in the systems, right? And so, with a short-term rental, there's a lot of moving. So you've got people moving out at 10 a.m., hypothetically 10 a.m. on Saturday, and 4 p.m., 5 p.m. that same day, a new family's coming in. And so how do you, I'm given the geography of your holdings, I'm fairly certain you outsource your management, but either that or it's, one heck of a travel bill. But I'm curious about how you manage those systems to make sure that everybody has an experience on your properties that's consistent with the standards that you obviously set.
Yeah. So every time we go into a new market, we obviously have to hire cleaners, handyman, quality control people. And so typically what we so there's 3 parts to it: cleaners, handyman, quality people. So quality people are people who go in, they're third parties, could be a neighbor, could be somebody else in the market. We hire maybe another handyman or something to go in and just check in on the property and make sure that the quality of it is at the level that we want it to be on. You won't be surprised how many neighbors actually work for us now. We go on, before we buy any property, we'll actually go and knock on their doors and tell them, hey, we're going to buy a short-term rental down the street. And if it's in a vacation neighborhood, like that's fine, obviously. But usually there's residentials or residents there in the neighborhood. And we go, are you okay with us running a short-term rental in your neighborhood? And if they say no, I don't buy the property. They rarely say no. They're actually grateful that we asked them, and they might ask a few questions and we tell them our experience, but we get to know them. We become their friends. And we even ask them, hey, do you mind keeping an eye out? Let me know. Here's my number. And a lot of times these guys, they're retired. We got one guy who does our landscaping. Another guy just walks in the property every now and then, checks in on it, makes sure things are not broken or whatever. And if it is, he tells us, we go get it fixed. And it's really important to have those key 3 pieces, and you can leverage your neighbors. But having a cleaning company, we rely heavily on cleaning companies because they have staff, especially for the big ones. All of our properties the North Carolina place is like 4,000 square feet, and there's 2 or 3 cleaners that clean it at a time. The Kentucky one, 9,700. There's 10 cleaners that come in and clean that place in the same day. So we can have a same day flip. It happens in the same day. We have people guest checking out at 10 a.m., 28 people going out, 28 people coming in at 4 p.m. And the place has got to be ready. And so we'll have cleaners and the whole crew come in and take care of the place. It's a little bit of an endeavor, but we get it done.
Yeah. So you've got, obviously the human capital piece of this is really important, right? What about the operation itself? How do you manage towel rack is broken by accident, right? Or, the hot tub needs to be cleaned or, whatever, right? How do you, what is the under, being the geek here, right? That's me, not you. The whole idea of, keeping an eye on this and keep tracking it so that that, the last time the hot tub in this property was emptied and cleaned and new filter and all that, you got to do that every 6 months or so. How do you track all that?
We hire it all out. There's property management software that can track some of it, but their companies. So number one, I think it's really important to point out that I am buying in maybe not traditional vacation markets, but vacation markets nonetheless. And so the benefit of that is that there are companies in place that can be responsible for these things. So for example, we'll use a Kentucky property, we have a specific company that comes and cleans the pool and deals with the chemicals of the hot tub and the changing of the hot tub every single week. That's what they do. Same thing is the exact same thing for my property in New York. Asheville, the cleaners, they have a part of their company does hot tubs because they have to deal with so many of them. And they have a separate person that comes and does that. For me to make the tracking and the easier, I believe it like human capital is actually really the answer to it, because when you have people boots on the ground, they can visually see if something is not up to par and they can report. And so if you have 3 different parties involved in the same endeavors, meaning having clean, functional, high standard, 5-star property, if somebody's not performing, the other person, one of the other 2 parties is going to see it and
Right.
report back to you.
Right.
But they have their own systems and processes. And I'm a big believer. I run my own company. I have a company of 9 employees. I also have got the hotel. I've got these STRs. I don't hire property management. I think it's a waste of money because there's so much technology that can automate things and messaging and VAs and all this stuff that we use and leverage. But at the end of the day, I'm a big believer in you hire people who can solve a problem for you and you get out of their way. You let them solve it for you. So the cleaning companies, for example, every single one of them has a different way of connecting to our calendars and our schedules and things to see when they need to do turns. And then if they're doing if they're doing landscaping or they're in charge of also the hot tub maintenance or whatever it is, they have their own systems and processes in place. I don't question it as long as it gets done to our standard that we're looking for. So it depends. It differs market to market, but there is a level of time that we have to take to figure that out at the very beginning.
Gotcha.
Compared to just everybody follow our current systems that we have.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. So I'm always curious about, successful folks like you who, have done very well in corporate America and have now done very well on their own, running their own businesses. And what I mean by well is, the mortgage is paid, the car payments, if they even exist, are paid, everything's handled, right? And yet you still get up on Monday morning and go to work. So what drives you? What is that purpose that gets you out of bed?
Yeah, I think it's changed over time for me personally. At first, when I was doing the hustle and I quit my job and I want financial freedom and I want legacy and all this. And that's still true. It's not that I don't want that as much anymore, but I think I had to dig deeper. For me, I get a lot of satisfaction from helping other people. When I'm currently actively trying to help out with some organizations in the community as well. But for me, what I want to do is be able to live a life where I have the opportunity to help other people, whether it's financially or teaching, or I love educating people. So I want to be in a position to be able to do that long-term whenever I want to do that. And I have to be financially free in order to do that. It's like a chain of events, a chain reaction. And so for me, when I get up on Monday morning, like that's at the back of my head. And I'm like, what do I need to do today to get me one step closer to being to that point where I can just hand the keys off to somebody else? The business keeps thriving and I can go and do these other things.
Awesome. Awesome. And so, obviously, one of the things that I find unique about folks that started in corporate America and have moved into this space is that they get a wide array of people in their lives that have given them advice and, mentors, so to speak, coaches. And so I'm curious about your pick, dealer's choice, right? But I'm curious about the best advice you ever got and who gave it to you.
That's a really good question. I know you even prepped me from the beginning, but I was like, it's funny. I do some podcasts and they prep me with some of the questions beforehand. And usually it's like when I'm talking, it'll come to me and I'll be like, that's the piece of advice I'll use for this. In this case, I think of one of my good friends. I had a buddy, really, he was highly successful and he got in a really serious accident and a car accident where he couldn't do his job. He couldn't work anymore. Couldn't do anything anymore. And the one thing he told me was, he said, Kenny, like at the end of the day, all your effort and your energy to make money, it doesn't even matter. He's like, why are you doing it? What's the drive? Remember and I'm like, it's like, I want to help people. And I want to do this. And he's like, don't forget about your family. Spend time with your family. And he's like, I wish I had done that more. I wish I had done that more. And even though like leading up to this, like I can't do as much of that now as I did before. I'm lucky to be alive, but I'm limited. And I wish I could have done that more. And so that's always stuck with me through every decision I make. And so I find myself telling people, just saying more of no rather than yes, I can do that, or yes, that's a good idea. Let's invest in that, or yes, let's do all these different thousand things that we can do. It just takes away from the actual priorities in life. And I just always think, he told me, doesn't matter to the grand scheme. The decision you make that you're making a big deal out of doesn't matter to the grand scheme, or what is your whole purpose. And so that's really sat with me. And every decision I make, it goes back to the family. Sometimes I have to make sacrifices if it's a strategic play, but a lot of times it doesn't matter. And I probably should just say no. So
Yeah. It's interesting. It's somebody had given me some similar advice, and to paraphrase it is, on your deathbed, there's no one ever wishes they were.
yes.
Right.
Yep.
So speaking to kind of your experience, and I fundamentally believe that we learn way more from our mistakes than we do from our successes. So I'm curious, what's a professional decision that you look back on and be like, oh man, I would love to have that back. And how did you handle it?
Man, where do I begin? Got a solid list. Yeah. The number one thing, it just would have saved me so much time and money too. I lost money doing this stupid thing. So first off, I bought some land in Arizona and I wanted to build a really cool short-term. It was near the Grand Canyon. It'd be the closest property near the Grand Canyon. I was going to build this big house on it. I paid 10 grand for architectural plans and got a perk test and got an alternative septic system. I mean, we were in like $50,000. And then I went to apply for a permit to do the building structure with the county and they denied it. And I was like, what's wrong? They said, you can't build this size on this type of land and what you're trying to do as a short-term rental and blah, blah, blah. And I didn't pick up the phone and call, which sounds ridiculous, but I was just like, I assumed my realtor told me it was okay. Oh, the septic guy was like, yeah, you could theoretically build this size house based on this septic system. And I'm like, yeah, let's do it. It was never a let me trust but verify situation. And I couldn't build. And I still have that property. It's just empty land sitting today. And it's just a cold, harsh reminder that don't be afraid to pick up the phone and make a phone call to know, especially with short-term rentals and regulation, get down, cut and dry. Can I do this or can't I do this? Get things in writing. I can't tell you how many times it's bailed me out of trouble now that I understand that. And it sounds super simple and stupid, but if I could go back in time and tell myself one thing other than get started sooner, would be to don't be afraid to pick up the phone and think about who is coming to your properties and what they'll enjoy. Those two things are like key pieces of advice I would give myself.
Really good advice. So I'm also curious about, how leaders like yourself, how you continue to grow, how do you sharpen the saw, so to speak? And so I'm interested in learning more about how you take in information, books, video books, conferences, whatever, and who you paying attention to these days? What authors and creators?
Yeah, so I do a lot of audiobooks. I watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and I talk to other people, other friends and colleagues and people, partners I have relationships with, and I talk about their businesses with them. And I ask them these questions. And I find that I typically get like the best advice or the best direction from people who are doing something who have nothing to gain from you doing that as well. If I were to get an ad and click on an ad, obviously it's salesy and they're trying to sell me into a program and it sounds good, sounds like it's going to fix all my problems. But to hear somebody else say, I'm like, man, I am struggling with this marketing component. How do I solve it? And then to hear what they're doing to solve it and their recommendations, I have found that's like some of the best success in listening to who they refer. And it just gives me a wide open view of all the different options out there. So that's a good place I start with. I listen to a lot of audiobooks, so I can't say, oh yeah, this particular author, but I will give you one that I've listened to all of his stuff and I recommend it 100%. Mike Michalowicz. Now, everyone knows him for Profit First. That's like his book. That's his thing. And he speaks on Profit First. But his second one is actually the one that's fundamentally changed my business. And it's called The Pumpkin Plan. And I listen to it like at least once a year. And it's all about niching down and focusing on how can we really concentrate all of our efforts on the right type of customer avatar to grow our businesses. And so he's got Clockwork and I can't remember the other one. I don't know. I've listened to all of his stuff. It's great. But that one is on another level. It was on another level for me. And so for people who are like, hey, I have questions about growing my business, like that book I'm like, you got to listen to that book. So amongst many others, but that's one. And then obviously listening to or speaking to other people and networking and hearing ideas. So
yeah, Kenny, I asked that question selfishly because I'm always looking to build on my reading list. So, and I read Profit First, but I haven't read any of his other stuff.
Plan. It was my mind-blowing experience for me. It opened some ideas and doors. Yeah.
So I suspect where you're going to go with this, but I'm going to ask anyway. How do you define success in your life?
That's a good question. We'll see. You let me know if I answer the way you thought I was going to.
Wrong answers.
Yeah, seriously. For me, I think that's actually a really tough one because I know myself and a lot of people have a tendency to always be like reaching for the next best thing. You know what I mean? We're never satisfied. We're always hungry. That's the plight of the entrepreneur. We're never there yet. Maybe we've defined there, but then the goalposts keep moving. And so I think success really centers back to how grateful we are for what have accomplished so far. I think we have to take a step back, and I do it every now and then. I go, wow, look at the position I'm in and look where I've come. We accomplished so much more than we've ever imagined in 6, 7, 8 years compared to what we think we can do in 6, 7, 8 months. We kind of short-end our long-term goals and try to expedite our short-term goals. And it tends to be the inverse is true. And for me, I look at success based off of just being grateful for what I have in my family and where we are today. I think it changes. I don't really have a great definition for it. Maybe I should one day or write it down, but I've noticed my definition of it changes as I progress through life and I look back and see what I've been able to accomplish.
Yeah. And as a guy who's way older than you, it will change. That's normal. So that's all good.
Yeah. And that's fine.
Yeah. When I was in my 30s, I wanted to conquer the world and, run companies and slay dragons and all that. And at 56, I say no a lot, it's interesting.
And that's great. And that's funny. I think that's a level of success too, where you have the opportunity to say no to things. It's like, that's a great opportunity, but I just can't do that right now. I think that's a level of success that's been reached.
Yeah. Well, good for you. Congrats. So when not talking about real estate, what do you like to do for fun?
Oof, that is a great question. Changes depending on where I live. I've lived in a lot of different locations. Not like a ton, but maybe a ton. It's probably a ton for most people. But like, for example, I lived out west when I was in Utah and Colorado. I used to go dirt biking and climbing and things like that. And I still do some mountaineering, but I have to travel for that. And when I moved to New York, I got really into like welding because it's like cooler up there and I could weld more during the year. I don't know. It's the thing. And then now I'm in North Carolina where we've got the beach and the mountains, but I just got an off-roading truck. So I've been doing some of that. And then obviously just spending time with my family and trying to enjoy. I've got two toddlers. I got another one on the way. And so it might sound lame. The kids take up a lot of the time in the hobby stuff. So I try to
Not
focus on
being
them and focusing on family things. We got a pizza oven and started a whole thing around that. And I could tell you all about baking homemade pizzas and dough recipes and things. But it all centers on doing stuff with the family now, and that's fine.
Yeah, I remember years ago, my uncle and aunt who decided not to have kids in there. And my uncle, who is, he's the cool uncle, right? These guys that fixes cars and boats, right? Right. Because he doesn't have tuition to pay for and stuff like that, although he does help. But, he's like, hey, you need a hobby. And I'm like, hang on. You see those two little girls running around in your backyard? Those are my hobbies. That is my all waking hours are spent chasing them, dressing them, feeding them, hanging out, throwing a ball or, swimming or whatever.
Swim, soccer,
Yes.
all of that. Like you're at those things, supporting them. And it sounds lame. That's parenting. Not that parenting's lame, but like that's part of the job. And so it's enjoyable though, seeing their successes and their growth and being a part of that. That was one of my goals in life was like, yeah, I had a good dad. I wasn't perfect. How can I elevate that and be even better and improve that experience? And seeing that in my girls as well has been great. So.
One man's opinion, but I've got a 23-year-old and an 18-year-old, and you only get 18 summers with them. So you might as well just enjoy the hell out of it because, pretty soon mom and dad aren't cool and they don't want to hang it.
That's a good point.
Yeah. So if people want to learn more about you or STR, what's the best way to do that?
They can follow me on social media. So at Kenny_Bedwell, Bedwell, as it sounds. Reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram, or I've got LinkedIn as well. If you're more professional, it's Kenneth Bedwell on like, it's under Kenny too, but you could reach out to me, private message me. I told you at the beginning of the show, I'm not that popular. So I talk to people, I'll message back. And if you're interested in investing in short-term rentals, or that's what I specialize in, I help people find deals. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me and I can point you in the right direction or get you some good resources to help you.
Fantastic. Well, Kenny, thank you so much for joining us today. It was really a pleasure meeting you, and I'm really excited to stay in touch and continued success.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Absolutely.
This has been The Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.
This has been The Real Estate Underground. Don't forget to subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, Undergrounders, remember your real estate journey begins with a simple step forward. Now get to it. Bye for now.